Morgan stepped off the transport shuttle and stared at the massive research station floating in the darkness of space. The structure stretched for kilometers in every direction, a gleaming monument to galactic cooperation. Scientists from 100 different worlds worked here, sharing knowledge and pushing the boundaries of discovery. Had dreamed of this moment for years. Now she was finally here. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, pulled her bag over her shoulder and walked into the receiving area. Dozens of alien beings moved through the wide corridors. She saw tall, thin creatures with 6 arms, short, stocky beings covered in thick fur. Things that floated without legs, things that crawled on too many legs. The diversity was breathtaking. A human man in a dark blue uniform waited near the main desk. He was tall, maybe 40 years old, with graying hair and a friendly smile. He walked over and extended his hand. "Dr. Morgan, I'm Commander Cole, human liaison for the station. Welcome aboard." Shook his hand gratefully. "Thank you, Commander. I'm excited to be here." "Call me, we don't stand on ceremony much." He gestured down one of the corridors. "Let me show you to your quarters, then I'll take you to meet your department head." They walked through the station while pointed out important locations. The cafeteria that served food for 50 different species. The medical bay with equipment had never seen before. The observation decks with views of the moon below and the gas giant beyond. Everything was bigger and more advanced than had imagined. "How many humans are stationed here?" asked. 12 right now, including you. We're spread across different departments. It's not many, but we're building our presence." His voice carried a hint of pride. "You'll be the second human in the Environmental Adaptation Department." They reached quarters, a small but comfortable room with a bed, desk, and viewport. Dropped her bag and followed back into the corridor. Her heart was beating faster now. She was about to meet the famous doctor, the scientist whose papers on adaptation she had studied for years. The Environmental Adaptation Department occupied an entire section of the station, led through a set of heavy doors into a large conference room. About 20 alien scientists sat around an oval table. They turned to look as entered. At the head of the table sat Doctor. He was a species had only seen in videos before. His body was roughly humanoid but covered in hard, chitinous plates that gleamed dark blue under the lights. His head was, with large compound eyes and mandibles that clicked softly as he moved. He stood nearly 7 feet tall. "Ah, the human." His voice came from a translator device on his chest. It sounded cold and precise. "You are late." Checked her watch. She was exactly on time. "I arrived at the scheduled hour, Doctor." "Then you should have arrived early," gestured to an empty chair near the far end of the table. "Sit. We are discussing adaptation classifications." Took her seat, feeling the eyes of every scientist on her. Gave her an encouraging nod and left the room. She was on her own now. Manipulated a control panel and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed hundreds of species arranged in a pyramid structure. "This is my life's work," he said. "Every known species classified by their adaptive capability. At the top, you see we evolved on a world with temperature variations of 100 degrees between day and night. Our bodies can function in extreme cold and moderate heat. We are the most adaptable species in known space." He gestured to the middle of the pyramid. "Here are species with moderate adaptation. They can survive in varied conditions but have clear limits." Then his manipulator pointed to the bottom section. "And here we have the comfort-dependent species, those who evolved in stable, narrow environments and cannot function outside those parameters." Saw the human designation near the bottom of the pyramid. Her jaw tightened. "Earth," continued, "is a remarkably stable world. Moderate temperatures, abundant water, comfortable atmospheric pressure. Humans evolved in paradise compared to most species. Consequently, you have minimal adaptive capacity. Your presence on this station requires extensive environmental support systems." Raised her hand. "Doctor, I respectfully disagree with that assessment." The room fell silent. Several aliens made sounds that might have been gasps. His mandibles clicked rapidly. "You disagree with peer-reviewed research conducted over 3 decades. "I disagree with the conclusions," said carefully. "Humans have colonized every environment on Earth. We live in deserts where temperatures exceed 50 degrees Celsius. We live in Arctic regions at -40 degrees. We live at high altitudes with thin air and in coastal areas at sea level. We've adapted to extreme conditions for thousands of years." Made a dismissive gesture. "That is technology, not adaptation. You use tools to create comfortable conditions. That proves my point. Without technology, humans die in environments even slightly outside your comfort zone. But every species uses technology, countered. That's not a fair standard. It is the only standard that matters. His voice grew sharper. In my laboratory, we test biological adaptation. We measure how long a species can survive in controlled environments without technological assistance. Humans perform poorly in these tests. These are facts, Dr. Morgan, not opinions. Wanted to argue further, but she saw the expressions around the table. The other scientists clearly agreed with. She was the member of the department, the youngest person in the room, and a human. Nobody was going to listen to her. I understand, she said quietly. Seemed satisfied. He continued his presentation, discussing research protocols and upcoming projects. Tried to pay attention, but frustration burned in her chest. She knew was wrong. She knew humans were far more adaptable than his research suggested. But how could she prove it? The meeting ended an hour later. Scientists filed out of the room in small groups, talking in various languages. Stood slowly, gathering her notes. Was waiting in the corridor outside. That could have gone better, he said sympathetically. He's wrong, completely wrong. Maybe, but he's also the head of the department and one of the most respected scientists in the station. Guided her down the corridor. My advice, keep your head down, do your work, and don't make waves. Is that what we do now? Just accept whatever aliens tell us about ourselves? Sighed, I know it's frustrating, but has never admitted being wrong about anything. Fighting him will only make your time here miserable. They reached the department office, where was supposed to receive her laboratory assignment. An administrative alien handed her a data pad, read the assignment, and felt her heart sink. Laboratory Section 7, she read aloud. Sub-zero temperature zone, direct supervision by doctor. Read over her shoulder and winced. That's the coldest section of the station's personal laboratory. He's putting me in a freezer. Looks like it. He probably wants to demonstrate his point about humans needing environmental support. Stared at the assignment for a long moment, then a small smile crossed her face. You know what? This might be perfect. What do you mean? If he wants to see how humans handle extreme environments, I'll show him. Smile grew wider. I'll show him exactly what humans can do. Looked worried. Whatever you're thinking, be careful, doesn't play games. Neither do I. Tucked the data pad under her arm. When do I start? Tomorrow morning, 0800 hours. Perfect, I'll be ready. Walked back to her quarters with new determination. Thought humans were weak, and the cold hit like a physical wall the moment she stepped through the airlock into Laboratory Section 7. The temperature display on the wall read -40 degrees Celsius. Her breath came out in white clouds that froze almost instantly. Within seconds, her exposed skin burned with cold. A technician handed her a bulky environmental suit. The suit was thick and heavily insulated, with heating elements woven throughout the fabric. Pulled it on, feeling clumsy and restricted. The helmet sealed with a hiss, and warm air flowed across her face. Follow me, the technician said through the suit radio. Laboratory Section 7 was enormous. The main chamber stretched 50 meters in every direction, with smaller rooms branching off on all sides. Everything was covered in a layer of frost. Equipment sat on long tables, all designed to operate in extreme cold. About a dozen alien scientists worked at various stations, all of them from cold-adapted species. None of them wore environmental suits. Doctor stood near the center of the lab, his dark blue carapace glistening with ice crystals. He moved with easy grace despite the freezing temperature. He saw and walked over, his movements precise and controlled. Dr. Morgan, I see you required an environmental suit, as expected. The regulations require suits for species outside their comfort range, said. Yes, regulations designed to protect weak species, gestured around the laboratory. Everyone here except you can function naturally in these conditions. You require artificial heating just to survive. This demonstrates my point perfectly. Bit back a sharp reply. Getting angry would accomplish nothing. Led her to a workstation in the corner of the lab. Your duties will be simple. Data entry, equipment maintenance, basic organizational tasks. Nothing that requires extended periods in the cold or fine motor control, which I understand humans lack in low temperatures. I'm a qualified, said. I can do more than data entry. When you prove you can function in this environment, perhaps. Until then, you work within your limitations. Handed her a data pad. These files need to be sorted and uploaded to the main system. Begin. For the next 6 hours, sat at her workstation and processed files. The work was mind-numbing and far below her skill level. Worse, the environmental suit made everything difficult. Her gloved fingers were clumsy on the controls. The suit's bulk made simple movements awkward. She had to stop every hour to let the heating elements recharge. The other scientists ignored her completely. They moved around the lab freely, working on complex experiments and discussing their findings. Was treated like a piece of furniture, necessary but unimportant. During her lunch break, ate in the multi-species cafeteria with another human researcher named Greg. Greg worked in the astrophysics department and had been on the station for 2 years. "So how's the ice box?" Greg asked. "Cold and frustrating," poked at her food. "Has me doing grunt work. He's not even pretending to treat me like a real scientist." "That's his style," Greg said. "He's been using humans as examples of weak species for the past year. Every presentation, every lecture, he points out how we need support systems and can't handle real challenges." "Why haven't we pushed back?" Shook his head. "We've tried, but has data to support his claims. Lab tests, environmental studies, comparative biology. On paper, his arguments look solid." "They're not solid, they're incomplete," leaned forward. "His tests only measure short-term tolerance in controlled conditions. He's never tested long-term adaptation or gradual exposure." "Can you prove that?" Greg asked. "I think so, but I need time and access to equipment." Looked concerned. "Be careful. Is preparing a major presentation for the Galactic Science Council in 2 months. If his species rankings get officially adopted, it could limit human participation in all kinds of programs. Exploration missions, research grants, colonization projects, everything." "What?" Felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. "The want exclusive contracts for ice world surveys," Greg explained. "They're arguing that only cold-adapted species should be allowed in certain environments. If the Council accepts classifications, we could be shut out of huge opportunities." Thought about this while she finished her lunch. The situation was worse than she had realized. Was not just some arrogant scientist. His research could have real consequences for all of humanity. Someone needed to prove him wrong. Someone needed to show the galaxy what humans could really do. That evening, returned to her quarters and spent hours reviewing published papers. She read every study, every experiment, every conclusion. And slowly, she began to see the pattern of flaws in his methodology. Tested species in static environments. He would place a subject in extreme cold or heat and measure how long they survived without assistance. But he never tested what happened over time. He never examined whether species could adapt if given the chance. His entire framework assumed that adaptation was fixed and unchangeable. But knew better. Human history was full of examples of adaptation. People who moved to high altitudes developed increased lung capacity over generations. People in hot climates developed different sweat patterns than those in cold climates. Adaptation was not static. It was dynamic, responsive, and powerful. She needed to prove this to in a way he could not ignore, and she had an idea of exactly how to do it. The next morning, went to his office before reporting to the lab. "I need your help with something," she said. Looked up from his desk. "What kind of help?" "I want to run an experiment, a real one, not data entry." Pulled out her data pad and showed him her proposal. "I want to test adaptation responses in graduated environmental conditions." Read through the proposal, his expression growing more worried with each page. "This is dangerous. You're talking about exposing yourself to extreme temperature swings." "Controlled temperature swings, gradual changes over weeks. My body can handle it." "And if you're wrong?" "I'm not wrong. Humans are adaptable. We just need the chance to prove it." Was quiet for a long moment. "You'll need authorization from to use the laboratory environmental systems like this." "I know. That's why I need you to help me write the proposal in a way he'll approve. Make it sound like I'm testing equipment tolerance, not human adaptation. He's so confident in his theories that he won't look too closely." "You're asking me to help you trick him." "I'm asking you to help me prove the truth." Met his eyes. How many more times are we going to let aliens tell us what humans can and can't do? How many opportunities will we lose because someone thinks we're too weak to handle challenges? Sighed, all right, I'll help you write the proposal, but if this goes wrong, it's on both of us. It won't go wrong. They spent 2 hours crafting the proposal. When they finished, it looked like a straightforward study of equipment performance in variable temperatures. Would test how various instruments and systems handled gradual temperature changes in Laboratory Section 7. Would never suspect her real purpose. Submitted the proposal that afternoon. She waited nervously while reviewed it. He barely spent 5 minutes reading before he approved it with a casual gesture. Fine, test your equipment. Just keep the temperature changes contained to your work zone and do not interfere with our real research. Kept her expression neutral. Thank you, doctor. She walked back to her workstation trying not to smile, had just given her everything she needed. He had authorized her to control the environmental systems in her section of the lab. He had given her permission to change the temperature however she wanted, and he had done it because he was so certain that humans were weak. That certainty was going to be his downfall. Began her experiment the next day. She programmed the environmental control system in her work zone to increase temperature by 0.5 degree every day. The change would be so gradual that nobody would notice at first, but over weeks, her section of Laboratory 7 would transform. She started at -40 degrees, the same temperature as the rest of the lab. By her calculations, she would need about 6 weeks to reach comfortable room temperature, and during that time, her body would adapt to every single degree of change. For the first few days, nothing seemed different. Worked in her environmental suit, processing data and maintaining equipment. The other scientists continued to ignore her, checked on her work occasionally but showed no interest in her experiment. On day 5 made her first test. She removed her environmental suit for 10 minutes while working. The cold was brutal, painful, almost unbearable, but she forced herself to endure it. Her body started shivering violently, trying to generate heat. Her fingers grew numb, but she did not put the suit back on until her timer ran out. Every day she pushed herself a little further. 15 minutes without the suit, 20 minutes, half an hour. Her body screamed in protest, but slowly, gradually, it began to adapt. Her metabolism increased to generate more internal heat. Her blood circulation improved to keep her extremities warm. The same mechanisms humans had used for thousands of years activated in her body. By the end of the second week, was working without her suit for hours at a time. The temperature in her zone week 3 brought work zone to -20 degrees. The change was becoming noticeable now. Ice that had covered her equipment for weeks was beginning to melt. Small puddles formed on the floor around her workstation. The other researchers glanced over occasionally, curious about the warmer section of the lab. Worked without her environmental suit now. She wore normal clothes, a long-sleeved shirt and pants, nothing special. Her body had adapted remarkably well to the gradual temperature increase. She no longer shivered constantly. Her fingers maintained their dexterity. She could work for full shifts without discomfort. The data she collected showed exactly what she had predicted. Her core body temperature remained stable. Her metabolism had increased by 12% to generate more heat. Blood flow to her extremities had improved significantly. Her body was doing exactly what human bodies had done for when exposed to cold. It was adapting. Doctor finally noticed the temperature change on day 23. He walked over to station with his data pad, his compound eyes reflecting the laboratory lights. The temperature in this section has risen 15 degrees from baseline. Explain. Looked up from her work. It's part of my approved experiment, doctor, testing equipment response to graduated temperature changes. The proposal that I would vary the temperature in my work zone. I did not authorize this degree of change. The proposal set no specific limits on the range of variation. You approved it without restrictions. Kept her voice calm and professional. His mandibles clicked in annoyance. He pulled up the proposal on his data pad and scanned through it, had been very careful with the wording. The document talked about testing environmental systems across a wide range of conditions. It never exact temperatures or time frames. This is disruptive to the laboratory environment, said. My work zone is isolated from the main research areas. The temperature changes are contained as requested. The other scientists are not affected. Looked like he wanted to argue, but he had no grounds. He had approved the experiment. was following proper protocols, and her work zone was indeed separated from the rest of the lab. "Continue," he said finally, "but keep these changes contained. Do not interfere with real research." "Of course, Doctor." Walked away, still looking irritated. Allowed herself a small smile. The hard part was coming, but she had cleared the first obstacle, had given her permission to continue, which meant he had given her permission to take the experiment to its conclusion. By week 4, section had reached 0 degrees. Water no longer froze instantly. She could handle equipment without her fingers going numb. The other researchers definitely noticed now. Some of them came to her station just to feel the warmer air. A researcher named stopped by one afternoon. He was smaller than, with lighter blue coloring on his carapace. "How are you functioning without your environmental suit?" he asked. "My body adapted to the temperature," said simply. "Adapted, but doctor says humans cannot truly adapt." "Doctor is wrong about that." His mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "You should not say such things. He does not accept contradiction." "Then he should not make claims that contradict reality." Looked at her for a moment, then walked back to his station. New word would get back to, but she did not care anymore. The truth was becoming obvious to anyone who bothered to look. Visited that evening after shift ended. They met in the observation deck, a quiet area with a view of the gas giant that dominated the sky. "People are talking about your experiment," said. "The whole station knows about the human working in the cold without an environmental suit." "Good, let them talk." Is not happy. He's been making comments about improper research methods and contaminated data. "My methods are sound and my data is clean," leaned against the viewport. "He's unhappy because I'm proving him wrong." "You've proven you can adapt to rising temperatures in a cold environment. That's impressive, but is it enough?" Turned to face him. "It's not enough yet, but it will be." "What are you planning?" "You'll see, trust me." Shook his head but smiled. "You know, when you first arrived, I thought you'd keep your head down and play it safe. I'm glad I was wrong. Someone has to stand up for humanity. Might as well be me." Week 5 brought the temperature to 15 degrees Celsius. His work zone felt almost comfortable now. She had traveled from -40 to +15, a span of 55 degrees, and her body had handled it perfectly. The adaptation was complete. She could function in either extreme now. But was not done. She had proven that humans could adapt to temperature increases. Now she needed to prove something even more dramatic. She needed to show that humans could thrive in conditions that would destroy cold-adapted species like the... She called a meeting with Greg in her quarters that evening. "I need to expand the experiment," she told them. "Take it to the next phase." "The next phase?" Greg asked. "What does that mean?" Pulled up her data on the wall screen. It showed temperature projections for the coming weeks. "I'm going to turn laboratory section 7 into a furnace. I'm going to push the temperature up to 45 degrees Celsius." His eyes widened. "That will drive out all the cold-adapted species, including..." "Yes, it will, and I'll still be working comfortably. That's the point." "This will start a major conflict. Won't let you take over his laboratory." "He already authorized the experiment. The approval has no temperature limits. I can legally push this as far as the environmental systems allow." Greg looked at the projections. "This is brilliant. Insane, but brilliant. You're going to prove human adaptability by making the lab environment completely hostile to the species that claims superiority." "Exactly. Says are the most adaptable species in known space, but they're specialists. They adapted to cold and only cold. Humans are generalists. We can adapt to anything." "When do you start the next phase?" asked. "Tomorrow, I'll accelerate the temperature increase to 5 degrees per day. In 1 week, laboratory section 7 will be too hot for any to work in. In 2 weeks, it will be completely uninhabitable for cold-adapted species." Ran his hand through his hair. "This is going to cause a massive incident. The department head forced out of his own laboratory by a human." "Good, maybe it's time for a massive incident. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned to respect humanity." The next morning, the environmental controls. Instead of the slow half-degree daily increases, she set the system to raise the temperature by 5 degrees every 24 hours. The change would be dramatic and impossible to ignore. She also expanded the experiment zone. Instead of just her small workstation area, she gradually extended the warmer environment to cover more and more of Laboratory Section 7. The system allowed for temperature gradients, so she could create a smooth transition from cold to hot. But over the coming days, the hot zone would expand to encompass the entire lab. Day 1 of the acceleration brought the temperature to 20 degrees. The researchers immediately noticed the change. The lab felt warm to them, uncomfortably warm. Several complained about the conditions. Confronted in the middle of the afternoon, his movements were slightly sluggish. The warmer temperature was affecting him already. You changed the parameters of your experiment without authorization. I'm working within the parameters you approved, Doctor. The original proposal did not specify a rate of change or maximum temperature. This is disruptive. You are interfering with our work. I'm conducting legitimate research. If the temperature affects your ability to work, perhaps you should consider using an environmental suit. They're available for species that need climate support. His mandibles snapped together sharply. The sound echoed through the lab, had just thrown his own words back at him, and he knew it. You will cease this immediately. I will not. My experiment is approved and ongoing. If you want it stopped, you'll need to formally revoke the authorization. As department head, you have that authority. Stared at her, could see him thinking through the implications. If he revoked her authorization, he would have to admit that he had approved an experiment without properly reviewing it. He would look foolish in front of the entire department. His reputation would suffer. But if he let the experiment continue, things would only get worse. The temperature would keep rising. Eventually, the lab would become completely uninhabitable for. He was trapped by his own arrogance. He had dismissed as a weak human not worth his attention. He had approved her proposal without really reading it, and now he was paying the price for that mistake. This is not over, said finally. He turned and walked away, his movements stiff and uncomfortable. Returned to her work. She felt a surge of satisfaction. The game was truly beginning now. Over the next 2 weeks, she would push Laboratory Section 7 to its absolute limits. She would create an environment that only humans could tolerate, and she would prove beyond any doubt that theories about human adaptation were completely wrong. Day 2 brought 25 degrees. Day 3 brought 30 degrees. The researchers grew increasingly uncomfortable. They moved slowly, their metabolisms struggling with the heat. Some began wearing cooling vests, primitive environmental suits designed for emergency situations. Worked normally. She drank more water and adjusted her activity levels slightly, but otherwise she showed no signs of stress. The temperature that was crippling the cold-adapted aliens was perfectly manageable for her. By day 4, at 35 degrees, most of the research team had abandoned Laboratory Section 7. They relocated their experiments to other facilities where they could work in comfortable cold. Only 2 other researchers remained, too stubborn or too proud to leave. Watched them struggle. Part of her felt bad about causing them discomfort. But a larger part remembered how had dismissed her, belittled her species, and tried to limit humanity's future in the galaxy. He needed to learn this lesson. They all needed to learn it. Day 5 brought the temperature to 40 degrees Celsius. Laboratory Section 7 had transformed from a frozen research facility into a sweltering. The walls that had been covered in frost for years now dripped with condensation. Equipment designed for extreme cold struggled to function in the heat. The air felt thick and heavy. Worked at her station wearing a light tank top and pants. She had a water bottle nearby and sipped from it regularly. Sweat formed on her skin and evaporated, cooling her naturally. Her body's thermoregulation system worked perfectly. She felt warm, but not dangerously so. She was comfortable. The 2 remaining researchers fled the laboratory that morning. They could barely move in the heat. Their metabolisms, evolved for freezing temperatures, were shutting down. They left without a word, relocating to emergency facilities elsewhere on the station. Only Doctor remained. He wore a full environmental cooling suit now, the kind used for emergency situations on hot worlds. The suit covered his entire body, pumping cold fluid through tubes to keep his temperature down. He moved slowly and carefully, each step obviously difficult. But he refused to leave. His pride would not allow it. Admitting defeat to a human was apparently worse than suffering in the heat. Watched him struggling at his workstation across the lab. Part of her wanted to end the experiment now, to spare him further discomfort. But another part, The part that remembered his dismissive words and arrogant certainty wanted him to feel every degree of temperature increase, wanted him to understand what it meant to underestimate humanity. News of the situation spread rapidly through the station. Scientists from other departments came to the observation windows to watch. The viewing gallery above Laboratory Section 7 filled with curious aliens. They stared down at the human working comfortably in her tank top, while the famous doctor struggled in an emergency environmental suit. And Greg came to check on during her lunch break. They met her in the corridor outside the lab, where the temperature was still normal. "The whole station is talking about this," Greg said. "You're famous, or infamous, maybe both." "How's holding up?" asked. "Barely, the heat is destroying him, but he won't leave," drank from her water bottle. "His pride is going to kill him if he's not careful." "Some of the alien scientists are calling this cruel," said carefully. "They say you're torturing him just to prove a point." "I'm conducting a legitimate scientific experiment with proper authorization. If finds the conditions uncomfortable, he's free to leave at any time. Nobody is forcing him to stay." "You know it's not that simple. If he leaves, he loses face. His reputation suffers." "His reputation should suffer. He's been wrong about human adaptation, and he's been using that wrong information to limit our opportunities in the galaxy. Maybe a little humiliation will teach him to be more careful with his conclusions." Greg grinned. "I like this side of you. Remind me never to get on your bad side." Returned to the lab. The afternoon shift was brutal for. At one point, his cooling suit malfunctioned. The system overloaded trying to compensate for the heat. For 10 minutes had no environmental protection. Saw him collapse against his workstation, his compound eyes dimming, his mandibles trembling. She almost called medical assistance. But then the suit rebooted. The cooling system engaged again, slowly recovered though he looked weakened. He stayed at his station but stopped trying to work. He just sat there enduring. Day 6 brought 45 degrees. Laboratory Section 7 was now officially hotter than most inhabited worlds. The temperature exceeded human body temperature by 8 degrees. It was brutal, punishing heat that would have been considered dangerous in most circumstances. Adjusted her strategies. She slowed her movements to conserve energy. She drank water constantly, replacing what she lost through sweat. She took short breaks every hour to cool down in the corridor. But she continued working. She continued functioning. Her body handled the heat through the same mechanisms humans had used in deserts and jungles for thousands of years. Could barely move now. His cooling suit ran at maximum capacity constantly. The power cells needed changing every 2 hours. Heard the suit's pumps whining with strain. The system was never designed for this kind of prolonged use in such extreme heat. In the early afternoon, finally tried to leave the laboratory. But when he stood up, his legs gave out. He collapsed to the floor, the cooling suit sparking and failing. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the lab. Ran to him immediately. She triggered the emergency medical response and grabbed a portable cooling unit from the storage locker. She placed the unit next to and activated it, directing cold air toward his body. "Medical team is on the way," she said. "Just stay still." Translator device crackled. "You win, human. You have proven your point." "This isn't about winning. It's about truth." "Truth, yes." His mandibles moved weakly. "I was wrong about your species, completely wrong." The medical team arrived minutes later. They were equipped to handle multiple species and quickly stabilized condition. They loaded him onto a transport gurney and prepared to take him to the medical bay. Before they left, managed to speak one more time. "Tomorrow, come to my office tomorrow, we must talk." Nodded, the medical team carried him away, leaving her alone in Laboratory Section 7. The heat pressed down on her from all sides. She was tired, sweaty, and pushed to her limits. But she was still standing, still functional, still human. She walked to the environmental controls and began slowly reducing the temperature. The experiment was over. She had proven everything she needed to prove. That evening, met within the observation deck. The gas giant turned slowly beyond the viewport, its colorful bands of atmosphere glowing in the light of the distant sun. "Is going to be fine," reported. "The medical team says he suffered heat exhaustion and system strain, but nothing permanent. He'll recover in a few days." "I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted to make him understand." "I think you succeeded. The whole station saw what happened. A human surviving in conditions that nearly killed N. That's not something people will forget. Leaned against the viewport. Do you think I went too far? Honestly, maybe a little. But sometimes going too far is necessary. Would never have listened to reasonable arguments or polite data. He needed to experience the truth directly. He wants to meet with me tomorrow. Be careful. Doesn't handle being wrong very well. He might try to discredit your experiment or claim contaminated data. Let him try. Every temperature reading is logged. Every physiological measurement is recorded. The data is undeniable. Spent the rest of the evening preparing for the meeting. She compiled all her research into a comprehensive report. The temperature logs showing the gradual increase from -40 to +45. Her physiological data showing successful adaptation at every stage. Comparison charts demonstrating the difference between human flexibility and specialization. The data told a clear story. Humans were not comfort-dependent weaklings. They were adaptable generalists capable of functioning across a massive environmental range. Its classification system was fundamentally flawed because it measured static tolerance instead of dynamic adaptation. The next morning walked to his office. The door opened automatically, revealing a room kept at -20 degrees, sat behind his desk looking diminished somehow. His carapace had lost some of its shine. His movements were slower than before. Dr. Morgan, please sit. Took the chair across from his desk. The cold was sharp after working in heat for so long, but her body adjusted quickly. Another demonstration of human adaptation, though she did not mention it. I have spent the night reviewing your experiment data, said. His voice through the translator sounded different, quieter, less certain. Your methodology was sound, your results are irrefutable. I was wrong about human adaptive capacity. Said nothing. She had not expected this direct admission. I built my career on species classification, on ranking adaptation as a fixed trait. I never considered that adaptation could be dynamic, responsive, evolutionary even within a single lifetime. His mandibles clicked softly. Your experiment has invalidated decades of my research. Not invalidated, modified. Your research on static tolerance is still valuable. You just missed the dynamic component. That is generous of you, more generous than I deserve after how I treated you. You treated me the way you treat everyone who disagrees with you, with dismissal and arrogance. Maybe this will teach you to be more open to alternative perspectives. Was quiet for a moment. I am preparing a presentation for the Galactic Science Council in 1 month. I had planned to present my species rankings and recommend policies based on those rankings. Obviously, I cannot do that now, not with this flaw in my methodology exposed. Leaned forward. What if we worked together instead? We could present joint research on dynamic adaptation. Show the Council a more complete picture of how species really adapt to environmental challenges. You would work with me after what I did. Science isn't about ego. It's about finding truth. If we collaborate, we can help the Council make better decisions about species capabilities and opportunities. Studied her with his compound eyes. Could not read his expression, but she sensed something changing in the alien scientist. Very well, he said finally. We will work together. I will provide my static adaptation data. You will provide your dynamic adaptation research. Together, we will present a complete theory to the Council. And you'll retract your classification of humans as comfort-dependent. I will publicly acknowledge that my classification was incorrect and that humans possess extraordinary adaptive flexibility. You have my word. Stood and extended her hand. After a moment, reached out with one of his manipulator arms and grasped her hand awkwardly. It was not a natural gesture for his species, but the meaning was clear. A partnership had been formed, and the galaxy's understanding of human capability was about to change forever. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of intense work, and spent nearly every waking hour in his office, preparing their joint presentation for the Galactic Science Council. What had started as a conflict between them transformed into genuine collaboration. Was brilliant, had to admit. His understanding of comparative biology across species was encyclopedic. Once he accepted that his initial conclusions were wrong, he approached the new data with complete scientific integrity. He questioned everything, tested every assumption, and pushed to provide the strongest possible evidence for her claims. Here, said one afternoon, pointing at a data chart on his screen. This section on metabolic adjustment needs more support. Show me the cellular level changes you documented during your temperature adaptation. Pulled up her detailed physiological scans. My mitochondrial activity increased by 18% during cold exposure. Brown fat deposits activated to generate additional heat. When temperatures rose, my sweat gland function increased proportionally. Every system adjusted dynamically. Fascinating, have no such flexibility. Our metabolism is optimized for cold but cannot shift. We are specialists. You are generalists. That's exactly the distinction we need to emphasize in the presentation. Neither approach is superior. They're just different evolutionary strategies. Mandibles clicked in what had learned was agreement. Yes, my error was assuming specialization indicated superiority. I confused optimization with capability. Stopped by occasionally to check their progress. He seemed amazed by the partnership that had developed. A month ago, you two were enemies, he said one evening. Now you're working together like you've been colleagues for years. Science has a way of cutting through personal conflict, replied. When you're both chasing the same truth, grudges become irrelevant. Still, I never thought I'd admit he was wrong about anything. Looked up from his work. Being wrong is a necessary part of being a scientist, Commander Cole. I simply needed a dramatic demonstration to remember that lesson. The presentation took shape over those weeks. It began with original research on static adaptation, presented honestly with all its strengths and limitations. Then introduced the concept of dynamic adaptation, using her experiment as a case study. Together, they proposed a new classification system that measured both static tolerance and adaptive flexibility. The system revealed something the galaxy had not understood before. Some species were highly specialized. They excelled in specific environments but struggled outside those parameters. Other species, particularly humans, were highly flexible. They had moderate baseline tolerances but exceptional ability to adapt to new conditions. Neither strategy was better. In some situations, specialists had advantages. In other situations, generalists prevailed. The key was understanding which species had which capabilities and using that knowledge to make informed decisions about exploration, colonization, and research. Greg visited one evening with interesting news. The Council delayed their vote on the Ice World survey contracts. Word got out about your experiment and changed position. Now they want to hear your presentation before making any decisions. That's good, right? Asked. Very good. It means your work is already having impact. The Council is taking human capabilities more seriously. The final week before the presentation was intense and rehearsed repeatedly, refining their delivery. They anticipated questions and prepared responses. They double-checked every piece of data, every calculation, every conclusion. The night before the presentation, could barely sleep. This was it. Tomorrow, they would present their findings to the most important scientific body in known space. The implications reached far beyond one experiment or one classification system. They were arguing for a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed different species. The Galactic Science Council chamber was enormous. Curved seating rose in tiers around a central presentation platform. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats. Felt her heart pounding as she entered the chamber. They took their positions on the platform. Holographic displays activated around them, ready to show their data. The chamber fell silent. Spoke first, his translator carried his voice to every corner of the vast room. Honored Council members, I stand before you today to present research on species adaptation. But I must begin with an admission. My previous conclusions on this subject were fundamentally flawed. A murmur ran through the audience. Scientists did not usually begin prestigious presentations by admitting errors. For 30 years, I have researched adaptation as a static trait. I tested how long species could survive in extreme environments without assistance. Based on this research, I created classifications ranking species by their adaptive capability. These rankings have influenced policy across known space. Paused, could sense his discomfort, but also his determination. I was wrong. My methodology measured only baseline tolerance. It failed to account for dynamic adaptation, the ability of species to change their physiological responses over time when exposed to gradual environmental shifts. This oversight led me to dramatically underestimate the capabilities of several species, most notably humans. The holographic displays activated, showing temperature data from the experiment. The audience watched as the graphs showed steady progression from -40 to +45 degrees Celsius. My colleague, Dr. Morgan, conducted an experiment that revealed this flaw. Over 6 weeks, she adapted her body to function across an 85-degree temperature range. This far exceeds what my models predicted was possible for humans. Stepped forward. What doctor's research showed was our baseline comfort zones. What my experiment showed was our adaptive range. These are different measurements, and both are important. She gestured to the displays, which now showed comparative data across multiple species. Some species are specialists. They have narrow comfort zones but excellent function within those zones. Other species, like humans, are generalists. We have moderate comfort zones but can adapt to much wider ranges when necessary. For the next hour, they presented their complete findings. They showed data, analysis, and theoretical frameworks. They proposed a new classification system that measured both specialization and flexibility. They demonstrated how this understanding could improve decisions about exploration, research assignments, and colonization efforts. The questions from the council were sharp and thorough. Scientists challenged their methodology, questioned their conclusions, and demanded additional evidence, and answered every question, supporting their claims with solid data. One council member, a tall being covered in feathers from a high-gravity world, asked a particularly pointed question. Doctor, your previous research recommended limiting human participation in extreme environment missions. Are you now revering that recommendation? I am, replied firmly. Humans should be considered for any mission where adaptive flexibility is valuable. Their ability to function across wide environmental ranges makes them ideal candidates for exploration and first contact situations. Another council member, a small aquatic species in a water-filled suit, addressed directly. Your experiment was impressive, but it was one human in one situation. How do we know these results apply to humans generally? Human history provides extensive evidence, answered. We evolved in Africa but spread to every continent on Earth. We live in deserts, Arctic regions, mountains, and coastal areas. We adapt to altitude, temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. This experiment simply demonstrated under controlled conditions what humans have been doing naturally for thousands of years. The presentation concluded after 2 hours and left the platform to respectful silence, which was apparently a good sign in council proceedings. They waited in an observation room while the council deliberated, joined them, bringing water and encouragement. That was incredible, he said. You presented a complex scientific argument to a skeptical audience and made them listen. Whatever happens, you should be proud. The data speaks for itself, said. If the council rejects it, they are not acting as scientists. 3 hours later, the council called them back. The chamber was packed now, with additional observers filling the galleries. Apparently, word had spread that something significant was happening. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species did not recognize, addressed them from the central podium. The Galactic Science Council has reviewed your presentation and deliberated on your findings. We find your research methodology sound and your conclusions well supported by evidence. Therefore, we officially adopt your revised classification system for species adaptation. Felt relief wash over her. They had done it. The speaker continued. Furthermore, we are reclassifying humans from comfort-dependent status to apex adaptive generalist status. Only 2 other species currently hold this designation. This reclassification will affect policy across all council-governed programs. The chamber erupted in discussion. Saw representatives from different species talking urgently. Some looked pleased, others looked concerned. The implications were enormous. Doctor, the speaker said, your willingness to admit error and revise your conclusions reflects the highest standards of scientific integrity. The council commends you. Dr. Morgan, the speaker continued, your experimental work has advanced our understanding significantly. The Council extends an invitation for you to lead a new research initiative on dynamic adaptation across species. We believe this field deserves extensive study. Was stunned, she had hoped to prove her point. She had not expected to be offered a leadership position. Over the following days, the impact of their presentation became clear. The Ice World survey contracts were reopened for bidding, with humans now eligible to compete. Several frontier exploration missions specifically requested human team members because of their adaptive flexibility. Research grants for human scientists increased dramatically. Received dozens of messages from other researchers wanting to collaborate. Universities across human space wanted her to give lectures. Media outlets requested interviews. Overnight, she had become one of the most prominent human scientists in the galaxy. His reputation transformed as well. Instead of being diminished by admitting his error, he was celebrated for his intellectual courage. Other scientists praised his willingness to follow evidence even when it contradicted his previous work. His standing in the scientific community actually increased. 1 month after the council presentation, stood in her new office at the research station. It was larger than her old quarters, with a view of the gas giant and dedicated workspace for her expanding team. She had 3 research assistants now, 2 aliens and 1 human, all eager to study dynamic adaptation. Stopped by that afternoon. He had been appointed as her co-director for the new research initiative, a partnership that had proven remarkably productive. "I received the mission proposals today," he said, placing a data pad on her desk. 17 expeditions requesting human teams. They want specialists and generalists working together. Smiled, "That's what we recommended. Different species bringing different strengths to solve complex problems." "Yes, though I admit, there is irony in my new role. I spent decades trying to prove superiority. Now I spend my days demonstrating how we are stronger working with humans." "That's not irony, that's growth." His mandibles clicked in amusement. "Perhaps you are right." That evening, sent a message back to Earth. She wanted her old professors to know what had happened, how one experiment had changed the galaxy's perception of humanity. She wrote about the cold laboratory and the transformation into heat, about his arrogance and his eventual humility, about the council presentation and its galaxy-wide impact. She described the new opportunities opening for humans across known space. At the end of the message, she included a reflection that summarized everything she had learned. "They said humans cannot adapt. They said we are weak and comfort-dependent. They said we need protection and support to survive outside our narrow comfort zone. But they were wrong. Humans are not specialists evolved for one perfect environment. We are generalists capable of thriving in conditions that would destroy most species. We adapt. We endure. We overcome. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us belong among the stars." Sent the message and turned to look out her viewport. The gas giant turned slowly in the darkness, beautiful and alien. Somewhere on that station, dozens of species worked together, learning from each other, growing stronger through cooperation. She had arrived months ago as an unknown researcher assigned to a freezing laboratory. She had been dismissed, belittled, and underestimated, but she had not accepted that judgment. She had proven her worth and her species' capabilities through determination and evidence. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again, had made sure of that. She had turned a frozen laboratory into a furnace and in doing so, had ignited a new understanding of what humans could achieve. It was just the beginning. The real work lay ahead, exploring new worlds, conducting new research, building new partnerships, but was ready. Humans were ready. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand that when you challenged humanity, when you claimed they could not adapt or achieve or overcome, you were making a mistake. A very serious mistake. Smiled and got back to work. The real test would come in the next few days. Was about to turn Laboratory Section 7 into a true furnace. And Doctor, the alien who claimed humans could not adapt, was about to discover exactly how wrong he had been. Had risen to -30 degrees. She was cold but functional. The other researchers started to notice. They made comments about the human being tougher than expected, but dismissed their observations. "Simple acclimation," he said, "not true adaptation." Just smiled and continued her work. Let him think whatever he wanted. The real test was still to come. Dependent, he thought they needed constant support and couldn't handle real challenges. He was about to learn a very important lesson. He was about to learn that underestimating humanity was a terrible mistake. She spent the evening reviewing everything she could find about biology and Laboratory Section 7. The more she learned, the more her plan took shape. Wanted to prove human weakness, instead would prove human strength, and she would do it in a way he could never ignore. Tomorrow, her real work would begin.